All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Metal and Forge podcast, a weekly podcast discussing manhood, entrepreneurship, American life, and matters of the soul. I'm Kent Lapp, and I'm here with the normies Patrick Miller and Austin Lapp. And tonight we're joined by our special guest, Becca. Becca Switzer or Switzer? Sorry. Becca, is it Switzer or Switzer? We had a Switzer growing up. Austin knows this, but I'm not sure how you pronounce your last name.
Oh yeah, it's Switzer, and it's the bane of my existence when people say Switzer. I'm like, do you say Switzerland?
It's a good point. But hey, in our defense, Austin, we grew up in our community. There was a Switzer, and it was spelled exactly like your name, and it was all Switzer. So
they were wrong.
Okay.
Well, now you have a question for them next time you see them.
Yeah. No.
Is it pronounced Switzerland?
You know you're wrong. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Becca, thanks for joining us. Becca is the creator and CEO of Roof Sales Mastery and author of Diamonds in the Sky. And Becca, you want to give our listeners just a brief overview of who you are and what you're about?
Yeah. Well, so thank you guys so much for having me on the show. And back in... Well, when I was 19 years old, I guess I can share my brief. So do you want like a brief recap of my timeline?
Be awesome.
So, I was just a regular kid in the Midwest. I graduated high school and then went to university for 2 years. And when I was 19, I ended up dropping out of college because I went home for the summer just to work at like my fast food job and like save up some money for beer and pizza and go back to school. And I ended up getting recruited into Cutco cutlery sales, like the knife sales. And I ended up doing so well at that. I was like, I'm not going back to school. I'm good at sales. I made like 25 grand that summer or something. And I was a 19-year-old kid. So I was like, bye, college. And I did that for a couple years. And then I got recruited into storm restoration roofing sales. And when I joined that industry, I mean, I was sold like the pie in the sky, right? They're like, oh, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. They did like the Ben Affleck in Boiler Room thing. Like, you're going to be a millionaire. You know what I mean? And I was like, okay. So I move out, like I literally sell all my stuff. I moved halfway across the country. I show up for this roof sales thing, and the owner of the company was like, cool, you're here. Ride around with Chris for a couple days, literally. And then they're like, listen to him knock doors, and then here's a stack of contracts. Just knock 100 doors a day. It's a numbers game. You'll figure it out. And I was like, what? I was like, because at that time I was 21, I was like, I am a 21-year-old college dropout who sold kitchen knives. I don't know anything about roofing. I don't know anything about insurance. Like, I literally have no clue what I'm doing. And so, long story made very short, I ended up figuring it out really quickly because I just had to. And then I realized, like, this is an insanely lucrative business. Like, I was making what I call drug dealer money at that time. Like, in 4 months, I made 105 grand as a 21-year-old. I was like, what? And then the next year I only worked 8 months and I made $250,000. And I'm like, nobody's teaching people how to do this. Like, I always tell people this, like, if I wanted to go and sell real estate tomorrow, I could buy books, I could get a coach, I could take a course, I could take classes. But if I wanted to go and make $250,000 as a 22-year-old college dropout in 8 months in roof sales, there were no resources. So I ended up writing a book called Diamonds in the Sky because it's hail. And I made my online courses, and now that's what I've been selling since 2014. I'm going on 11 years teaching the roofing industry how to scale their businesses, recruit sales reps, do sales training, work with insurance companies, and all that jazz.
Yeah, that's amazing. And congrats on your success. Because you actually have figured out a way to sell something online that you don't have to manufacture every time you make a sale. And let's just say you've been successful at it. So congrats to you on that. Hey, I got to ask you this. Do you get any of your inspiration from Tim Ferriss?
You know, it's so funny. So I'm writing another book right now. And in the book, I said, I was really inspired by Timothy Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, a book I never read, but the title told me everything I needed to know.
Really?
So it's so
That's
funny. Yeah, I don't read personal development. I don't know if I've actually read a single personal development book. I read like spiritual development stuff. So I don't know. I just, the only things that I did before I started my business, I did attend Brennan Burchard's conference. I think it was called Experts Academy. That's what it was. And it was all about like monetizing your expertise and building a funnel. And I did that. And then I also did Jeff Walker's product launch formula way back.
That's good.
Yeah, I've read that book. Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
So it was that, and then it was just hustle, doing the right things. And I'm actually curious before we get into it. So sitting here right now, if you look back on the last 10 to 15 years, what do you think were the key factors in you being successful at roof sales, you being successful at Roof Sales Mastery, you being successful at generating money online? Like, what do you give credit to personally for that?
I have always had a knack for sales psychology. Like, there's a story about my parents told me about, and I don't remember this obviously, but when I was 5 years old, I started selling Girl Scout cookies. And my dad was a doctor, and I went to his clinic. And the story is I was going up to the nurses to sell Girl Scout cookies. And I went up to this one nurse and I said, "Hi, my name's Becca. I'm selling Girl Scout cookies. And there's a bunch of different flavors. My favorite flavor is the Caramel Delights. You're going to want at least 4 boxes of those. Other people really like the mint, whatever it is, like the mint. What is it?
Yeah, the best one.
Something
the mint chocolate chip cookie.
Like,
Thin Mint.
Thin Mints. Oh, yes.
Exactly. I was like, and a lot of people really like the Thin Mints. So how many boxes do you want to add of those? That was my pitch. And then the nurse said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I didn't bring any cash today." And I said, "I'll take a check." I was 5.
Wow.
Okay. My parents didn't tell me to say this stuff. Like, I don't know where I got that. But I would say like the biggest things is just being able to synthesize information and creating repeatable processes and recipes for things. Like, I could understand like, okay, when I go through a sales pitch, like this is what needs to be said to prevent objections and then make it a risk-free no-brainer for people to say yes to me at the end. Right. So it was that, and just writing. I've always been a talented writer. I'm always been really passionate about writing. So writing sales copy has been really fun for me. So, I mean, it's all the same thing, right? It's like, how do you identify a customer, right? And know exactly what it is that they need to hear and make compelling sales copy to make them say, "Shut up and take my money." Like, that's just something that I got really good at. And that's what I've done in every sales position, whether it's been Cutco or roof sales or selling my training and stuff like that.
From the outside looking in, it seems like you kind of seem like the type of person that's just like endlessly optimistic. Is that how you are? Do you just appear that way? And if that's how you are, do you attribute a large amount of your success to that?
It's funny. I can get extremely stressed out and worried like any woman. Right. But anytime that I do get like that, it's like keeping myself in that state is not going to be helpful. So I do try to assume the best case scenario as often as possible. Because otherwise you're just doubling up on feeling bad. Like,
Right.
If I'm being negative about something because the situation is bad and on top of it, I'm being pessimistic, I'm doubly hurting myself. But if it's like, okay, like I'm a big, it is what it is right now person, like radical acceptance is something that I've had to learn and practice, where it's like, okay, we have a shitty situation here. Like, I just got hacked last week, made a bad one, like a bad hacking. Okay. And I was like, I could crumble and take a 3-day depression nap right now, or I can just go, okay, there's no use in beating myself up about the vulnerabilities that I left out there for myself on the internet. It is what it is. Now I can only do what I can do right now. And I mean, that's the approach that I take with things like that. So Am I endlessly optimistic? I wouldn't say that I'm one of those really annoying people that's just like always everything's good. Like, I definitely have those points where I'm like, God help me, this is not a good situation. But I think any successful person is just able to bounce back from those things, because it's like, well, this is the situation. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, agreed. Austin is currently in sales and real estate for his own business. I'm currently in sales for my own business. Patrick's sort of kind of in sales now that he's kind of doing his own thing.
Has to be.
If you were,
absolutely,
I kind of asked you like what you would attribute some of your success to, but if we were a group of salespeople right now and you were giving us sales tips or sales advice, like as sort of universal as possible for different industries, what would be a few things that would come to mind?
For sales specifically?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first thing is going to be know what your customer actually needs and wants. Like, what problem are you solving? Right? And in roofing, that might be like, do they just have an old, ugly roof? Do they have hail damage? What is it? Right? And then understanding and listening to what it is that they're concerned about. There's it's like if you listen to your customers enough, they will tell you exactly how to sell them. Like in the beginning, when I do a sales call on roofing, I'm like, so tell me why we're on the call. Like, what made you reach out and book a call with me? Like, how can I help you? Well, this and this and this is going on. We've been struggling with this. I'm like, tell me more.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's the first thing is they're going to tell you exactly what their problem is so that you know exactly what to address to be able to close them, right, on the solution that you have. The other thing is going to be preventing as many of the potential likely objections as humanly possible that you know are going to come up. Like, if you know your customer, you know your product, and you know what problem you're solving, you need to know what kind of objections people are going to say so that in your sales presentation, you're already addressing those so that you're playing better offense instead of defense.
Okay.
It's not a fun game when all of a sudden you're having to do ping pong, ping pong, ping pong because you didn't provide enough assurance and information up front. So at the end, they have all these objections they're throwing at you, and now it's a rap battle, right? So preventing as many objections with an offensive sales pitch is what I call it, is probably the most important thing. And then making sure that you're, at the end, you have a close that is like such a risk-free no-brainer that people don't have anything else to say except, so do I sign something? Or
Yeah.
like that's
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I mean, you obviously are selling that info successfully and you gave it to us for free, but I couldn't help myself. But sales is actually not what we brought you on to talk about. I was just saying before we pressed record that I had found you through Lifted. We rent out these roofing trailers, and I was brand new to the roofing industry a few years ago. We aren't a roofer, but we rent two roofers. So I was doing industry research, found you, and you have been fairly outspoken on at least a few of the topics we're going to get into tonight. And that's what we brought you out on to talk about. So let's just jump into it if you're good with it. I think the first one will wind up setting kind of the rest of the conversation up well, which is this issue of personal freedom. And this is personal freedom just matters a ton to me. I think it matters more to me than, honestly, from what I can tell, a lot of people, maybe most people. But so this one resonates with me. It seems like it's important to you also. Why is that?
Why is freedom important to me? Well, freedom I think that sovereignty is a birthright. Like the fact that we have people that showed up on Earth just like us, a little baby meatball shitting themselves, and then some years go by and that person gets to tell me how I'm going to live my life on this planet is bullshit. Like, it's crazy that we are electing people to tell us what we can and cannot do.
Mm-hmm.
There's some quotes that I read, like Thomas Jefferson is probably like one of the well, he is a daddy, right? He's one of the founding fathers. He's one of the founding daddies of freedom, right? In the United States. And one of the things that he said was, I much prefer dangerous freedom over peaceful slavery.
Yes.
And I mean, think about captivity is not good for living things, right? Like, look at lions in the zoo. They are miserable. And there are two different types of people in this world. There are people who would say, I prefer the cage because I know I'm going to get 2 square meals a day right on time and I'm safe. And I would rather have to chase down my food and maybe be hungry sometimes to not be stuck in that cage.
Yep.
Freedom is
same.
That's what gives us, that's what makes us feel like there's possibility, right? Another person that spoke a lot about freedom was Ayn Rand. And I want to find this quote because she said, I guard my treasures, my thought, my will, my freedom, and the greatest of these is freedom. Because without it, nothing else, we can't enjoy everything else to the fullest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that resonates for sure. I had heard some or seen some study headline. I didn't read the study. I didn't go into it. I wouldn't be able to pull it up. It just lodged in my memory pretty hard. This was from probably 3 or 4 years ago. And the study was actually saying how most people think the sort of baseline desire of humans is for freedom, and that's actually not true. The baseline desire in humans is actually to be taken care of. And I don't know if that comes from sort of the lizard part of our brain or sort of the inner bitch or exactly where that comes from. But that actually, when I saw that, it was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. You know, I don't know if I would say that of myself. I don't think you could say that of everyone. But I do think there seems to be some amount of people out there that actually desire to be taken care of more than they desire to be free, which is, you know, kind of scary a little bit, because to me that means you can kind of co-opt a certain amount of people and they will willingly do what you tell them to, even if the ends are bad. But a follow-up question, I'll kick it over to Austin and Patrick to chime in here, but where do you see most people being willing or even eager to give up their personal freedom over the last number of years?
Oh my gosh. Well, people have been giving up their First Amendment rights by the guise of taking it away from their opposite party, right? They don't understand that by supporting censorship on platforms, it's nice when you're on the side that feels warm and cozy right now because, well, the other side is being censored. They don't realize that they're stripping away those rights from themselves. You know, I think there's a saying out there that you can vote yourself into tyranny, but you can't vote yourself out of it.
Yeah, you got to shoot your way out.
Yeah, exactly. So like people don't realize they're doing that. I mean, bodily autonomy, the hypocrisy is hilarious to me. On one hand, you have people saying, my body, my choice, right? Like what a woman does with her uterus is absolutely no business of any man. And yet we have people enforcing experimental pharmaceutical drugs all over the country by Anthony Fauci, right? It's like, well, it's my body, my choice, unless it's that, right? So giving up your freedoms there. It's funny because you're right. It's interesting about safety and being taken care of. I'm assuming that's what it really means. Do you mean being taken care of in a nurturing sense, or do you mean in the sense of overall security as a whole?
Overall security being provided for, you know, brought into the fold. You're going to be okay here. You're protected with us. You don't have to go out there by yourself and potentially get eaten. That type of taken care of.
You know what's funny though? What comes to mind is think about how many people desire that. They think in a relationship and then they get so bored because they feel trapped.
Sure.
There has to be an element of freedom.
Yeah.
Or the sense of freedom. Like being kept does not feel good for long.
There's a relationship between freedom and responsibility that is, I think, part of the kind of tricky, you know, it's like we want freedom, but we don't want the responsibility that comes from that. Like would it be nice to be taken care of? Well, okay, at one level, yes, I get that. There's a lazy part of me that understands that it'd be nice if, you know, somebody was just giving me stuff I needed. But on the other hand, it's like, that's not how freedom works. If I really want to be free, I have to own every part of my life. I have to level up and own my shit. And that's, you know, that requires a kind of facing of your shadows, a facing of the demons inside. And you have to, you know, walk up to the abyss and, you know, risk falling in order to kind of level up to the point where you can be free. And freedom only works for people that have, you know, a certain kind of moral character. And it's related to the responsibility bit, but you can't be completely fractured and be free, because that's just anxiety. So if you know, in order to have freedom and enjoy freedom and flourish in freedom, you need to take responsibility, you need to own your shit, and you need to put your shit together. And it's like, well, that's way more than what maybe, you know, a lot of people want to grapple with. You know, well, I think everybody on this call, you know, is maybe on the other side of whatever journey has kind of made us face that abyss, and we've decided we would rather be free. And we were willing to sacrifice to be free, but not everybody's able to do that, or doesn't want to do that, or willing to do it.
I absolutely agree. And you're right. There is if you really accept that you're 100% responsible for the outcomes in your life, that's really scary to a lot of people, because victimhood is very seductive. Mm-hmm. If you can blame somebody else for something, you feel off the hook, right? But that's where a really powerful sense of self and like belief in your abilities is so important. Like if you really believe I can be responsible for myself, you're not going to trade your freedom for the sense of security, because you know that you can show up for yourself, right? Like let's use this on a more micro level. Let's say like there are people out there who would prefer the salary clock in, clock out job with a boss who gives them a position. There are very few people that are willing to go out and be like, I'll work for straight commission, self-generating leads for this job, even though I don't have the safety and security of the hourly job that I show up to. And I'm also not going to get a 401k and dental benefits and any of those things. But the opportunity is much higher. But the opportunity is much higher because it's more difficult. And because it's more difficult, you have people who are like, well, I don't want to have to, right? They would rather trade that freedom to be on the dystopian treadmill of corporate America, modern day slavery, right? There's safety there. And then they get to blame corporate America when they don't have freedoms, they don't have income, and they can't retire early, right? It's like, well, we can't make a living wage. Then don't work for the man.
Right.
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 That's right.
Right.
Yeah. That absolutely ties in with personal freedom, or I'm sorry, responsibility with what you were talking about. Because what you're saying, Beck, is essentially that's a pretty good way to sort of outsource a large amount of responsibility here. Get hired. I do what I'm told. It's supposed to all work out. I have a follow-up question here, and then I'll kick it to Austin. But how much do you think of your decision to drop out of college was due to your strong sense of personal freedom, your strong sense of personal responsibility, and then, oh, I guess I can make money, and what do I really need this for? I mean, was that really the thought process in that?
So I didn't have plans of dropping out of college, but I didn't necessarily believe in my heart of hearts that college was the golden ticket at that point. But when you're that age, like, you don't really know what else is out there, right? It's just kind of like the thing that you do. You go to high school, you get your diploma, and then you go to college, you get a degree, and then you hope that you make money somewhere. So I would say like it all kind of unfolded in time. I wouldn't say that that was something I was thinking. I was not particularly enjoying college. I was getting fat. I was really depressed. I had just started birth control too, which I didn't realize at the time stole 16 years of my life because it like turned me into a crazy person. But I was not doing well at college. Like I wasn't having a good time. And so when I came home for the summer and I took that job, it really was just an unfolding. I was like, oh, wow, I'm really good at this. Oh, I see that I'm directly responsible for my income. That's awesome because I know I'm good at stuff.
Yep.
Like I believe in my skill set so that I know that I can do this. And then, the culture in an environment like that is very much like there's a lot of positive recognition. There's a lot of encouragement. There's contests. There's all these things that really fed that primal thing about wanting to be good at things, like wanting to win. And throughout that process, I mean, the culture also teaches you that, right? Like, yeah, sure, you can go to work a 9 to 5 where somebody tells you that you're worth $20 an hour and you blah, blah, blah. And you do that and you hope to get $1 raise 10 years from now so that you can retire on Social Security. That was not sexy to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I wouldn't say that it was a calculated plan. It just happened, and I had really good leadership in that organization, and they took my talent with their training and leadership, and that just created a perfect storm for success.
Yeah. Well, it worked out well for you, obviously, and we actually talked about college on one of our recent episodes. So the only thing I would say on it right now, actually, I don't think any of us on this call have been to college. The only thing I would say about college is it's not the right choice for some people.
Dumb?
Well,
Yeah.
it's not the right choice for some people, it's just not. There was this other entrepreneur that had business owner who stopped in this week, and we were chatting a little bit, and I know he has a good thriving business and he's doing well, and turns out he has a couple hundred self-service storage facilities, and this guy's on a 10th grade education, so he didn't even finish high school. So
Yeah.
It's not the right answer for everyone, for sure.
Well, no, because it's I mean, unless you're going to be doing something that literally requires a specific degree, if you're going to be a medical doctor or an engineer or a lawyer or something like that, okay, that makes sense. But basically everything else, like think about how many people go to college and get a degree in like art or
Right.
like philosophy or what, or even they'll get a degree in business and then they don't do anything really with that. They end up going and taking a job that, yes, requires the piece of paper, but they don't apply almost anything that they learned at college to do this job. The crazy thing is, like, we live in an age where somebody can go and buy a $2,000 course to learn how to do a particular thing and triple the amount of income that their college degreed friends are making.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because there's this weird mental block around it. People have no problem going 6 figures into debt to get a piece of paper for something that they're going to be on the rat wheel of corporate America for the next 50 years with. But they're like, oh, I don't know, I couldn't invest in a $500 or $2,500 online course that could teach me how to make 3 times as much money in half the time. It's just I think it's a product of the machine.
Yeah.
The machine is built to create people who work a job and feed the machine.
Yep, totally. I agree.
Well, it goes back to
guys-
kindergarten. It starts in kindergarten. That programming, sit down in a row, shut up, face the front, raise your hand to go take a piss. Like, it starts all the way in kindergarten. And the ones that, you know, the bright ones that make it through high school, it's like, then we give them a, you know, free 4-year ride to make sure that we beat any independence out of them. It's like, now there are exceptions, like you said, Becca. My son is in pre-law down at Vanderbilt, so there's exceptions to that. But for the most part, I think, well, my youngest daughter, no longer my youngest daughter, we just had a baby, but my 15-year-old daughter is actually debating whether she moved to homeschooling this year, and she's got a job and she loves working at a cafe. She wants to start her own cafe. And just today we were talking about, it's like, you know what, we should just start a cafe for her, because she could get her GED and go run a cafe and have, by the time she's 18, you know, have a business, have way more experience than, you know, the people who are grinding it out at the rate of the lowest common denominator. And, you know, she'd be off to the races. But
Austin, anything you want to chime in with on the personal freedom thing before we move on?
Yeah, just, I love that concept of, because I've been meditating on the whole thing of freedom equals responsibility. And mine's more like, I guess to turn it spiritual, like the thing, this is not original by me, but like the blessing of God looks like more responsibility. You know, like I have happily married, 2 kids, 3rd one on the way, have a business that's doing well, pretty involved in my church. And all of those things grow because we want that, you know, we work towards growth and in every way. And then we get there and we're like, this is a lot to manage. Like, I've got properties, I've got people to care for, I've got a family to feed. I'm like, you know, the other day I was like, I don't know, in that stinking thinking, and I'm like, wait a minute, stop. You wanted this. Like, you wanted to be blessed. You wanted everything to grow. It did. Deal with it. Like, it's the only way forward. Like, if you don't want this, then it's like, yeah, then go work for the man and give up all. Like, you can't have one without the other, I'm finding out. Like, you can't have all the freedom without responsibility, at least not the kind that lasts or leaves a legacy. And like, I like what you're saying, Becca, because that's been hitting on a lot of what I've been rolling through my brain lately. So,
you know what? I think, so it's funny because humans do crave certainty, right? Like, we want security, we want predictability, we want to feel safe and secure, and we want things to be permanent. But the reality is, the only permanent thing in this life is impermanence. I mean, nature shows us that. Nothing sticks around forever. We have seasons, we have cycles, we have death, we have metamorphosis, right? We have change, we have fall. And so it's fascinating that we try to cling to that. And if you really think about it, though, we think that's what we want, but we actually don't. Like, when you actually look at human nature, think about the thing that, like, why would we watch a movie if we already know exactly what's going to happen? Why would we turn on a video game if we won the second we turned it on? That's where the fun and the adventure comes from, is from the unknown. And yes, that requires risk, but it's a slow, painful death to just have cookie cutter, predictable, right? Like, that might feel comfy cozy for a little while where you're like, oh, this is nice, I don't have to think. But it kills us. It kills our creativity. It kills our ambition. It's not the lifeblood of the human experience.
Yep.
good.
Okay, let's get into COVID and a anniversary that most people probably didn't pick up on, but we're pretty much 5 years and a month from COVID. I think there was people getting sick in Wuhan in November of 2019, and you know, this is December. We're recording this in now, so that was 5 years ago last month, which is kind of hard to believe. It just seemed like it went so fast. But so now that we're 5 years beyond COVID getting out and what appears to have been the Wuhan lab. This is a general question, and we can get into more specifics and stuff, but I'm just kind of curious, what's your overview, kind of what's your take?
My take?
What's
Can you be more
what's your
specific?
assessment as we're 5 years into COVID now and you're looking back on it? What are the biggest items to you, or if you were, as you kind of adjudicate COVID, I guess, what would be the biggest things that that stand out to you that were maybe good or so wrong, or what's your biggest thoughts, I guess, top line thoughts on COVID?
I mean, top line thoughts, the disease itself was real. It was man-made. It was funded by our government. And I think it was a major opportunity for some big people to make a lot of money, and that's what they did. Why all of the control? I mean, Anthony Fauci said it himself. I just watched a video clip of him back then saying, if you make life uncomfortable enough for people, they will do anything. Right. And so we had a lot of people resisting and didn't want to wear. I was so rebellious during COVID, dude. I mean, I didn't wear a mask in the airport. I would just be like, I'm not sick. When people, I was the asshole in Whole Foods that like people would be chasing me down. I'm like, no, thanks. Like, I just did not comply. The first month or so, I was scared just like everybody else because nobody knew anything. But it was extremely fascinating to me to just watch so many people just go with the flow and not question the obvious errors that were being presented to us. Like I was doing the math on it. Like I'd look and go, okay, so at my age with my health, I have a 1 in about 250,000 chance of dying, which is a 0.0004% chance of dying. I was like, I have a bigger chance of dying in a car accident driving my car, right?
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense. I've already had COVID. Why would I need to get vaccinated if I already have antibodies for say? There were just all of these things that nobody seemed to be questioning. And it was I think it was a time to create a lot of division, which obviously worked. I don't think that I've ever felt such division before this. Like, and it continued, right? Now it's right versus left in a way that I don't think anybody's ever seen before. But I think it was an opportunity for a lot of people to make a shitload of money, which they did. And a control experiment. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it really felt like. But I think it backfired.
Yeah. I agree.
I
yeah.
love how America's looking right now.
Yeah, I totally agree, 100%. So I would not disagree with anything that you said in your assessment of COVID. I would agree with everything that you just said, but I wasn't there in March or April, and maybe not even in May of 2020. When did you kind of arrive at these conclusions? Do you recall?
It took about a month and a half, I think. So if everything started getting really crazy in like March or April, it was by June. I was like, hold on a second. I mean, I got banned on Instagram so many times just for the stuff that I was posting. I was like, I was posting really funny stuff, like a picture of a pretzel, and it would be like COVID PPE device. Because, on an airplane, it was like, oh, God forbid you take your mask down. But if I eat my pretzels slowly for 45 minutes, nobody says a goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? So I remember starting to really spout off then, and I probably went a little off the deep end, but I have no regrets.
Well, you were in a tough state for COVID. I mean, that was the only time I'd seen anyone yell at someone else in a grocery store for not having a mask, and this was in 2022. We were skiing up there with the boys, and someone wasn't wearing a mask, and some other person was not having it, and literally screaming 2 years in.
Yeah.
In Colorado.
Yeah.
And I'm from Tennessee, so that just didn't really happen down here.
Yeah, for sure. Colorado, interesting place to be. It's pretty purpley blue at this point, but yeah, it was weird. Like it was just weird. It was the strangest time to be a human, feeling like walking around with nothing wrong with you and people treating you like you were a walking bomb. Like, I mean, the psychological damage alone, it feels like it's almost irreversible.
Yeah.
People just feel it treating you like you're a grandma killer or you're whatever, and so divisive and losing friends. And it's just, I mean, it was a crazy time.
Yeah, I think it permanently altered some people's inner landscape, like just cranked up the fear to a level that people just have a really hard time recovering from.
Yeah.
Well, Joe had this as a line in his special on Netflix. We lost a lot of people during COVID, and most of them are still alive. And
Yep.
that is spot on. I mean, I was even hearing stories of people like friends where they're meeting in a park and for the grandma to see the grandkid, and the grandma is physically running away from the 2-year-old because she doesn't want to get close. Like, what the hell? How about you don't meet at the park? How about you don't see each other at all if that's how it's going to be? A lot of people seem to lose their mind. Were you engaged politically before COVID, or was that kind of a turning point for you?
Dude, not at all. So it's really interesting though. I will tell there's a two-part answer to this. I was not somebody who's into politics at all. I never watched the news. None of that stuff interested me because it didn't really feel like it impacted me. COVID was the first time that it actually tangibly impacted my life and restricted my freedoms, my movements, right? And my body, like get vaccinated or you're never going to leave the country again. Like what? I remember having a mental breakdown one day because I was like, I have busted my ass to put myself in the financial position that I'm in so that I can enjoy all of the possible freedoms. And now you're telling me there is a chance that if I don't get a barcode on my forehead, basically, I'm not going to be able to travel. Like that actually was a fear that I had, right? Because it was like, if you don't have your Vax card, then you can't. And if they're going to make it a digital Vax card, then you can't fake a Vax card. And then you have to. So that was really scary. Now, I will tell you this. I realized during that time, I had been brainwashed by mainstream media. All of a sudden I realized it's funny. An ex had actually called me out. His mask that he wore was Donald Trump's mouth and it said China across it. And which is hilarious now, but like back then I didn't realize I was like, that's probably really offensive to Asian people and blah, 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 blah. And it spiraled into this conversation about like Donald Trump and stuff. And I'll never forget what he said to me. He said, Becca, you're telling me that I'm not thinking for myself while telling me how to think. And I was like, uh-oh. I was like, whoa, I am. And the conversation went on. And I remember after that, I sat down and I can't remember if I was on my computer or if I had a notebook, but I literally sat down and I was like, why do I hate Donald Trump? Because this is where it started. I was like, why do I hate Donald Trump? And I was like, well, people say he's racist. I was like, okay, well, why do I think he's racist? Nothing. I've got nothing. And then it was like, well, people say he's sexist. And I was like, why is he sexist? Didn't have anything to write down. I was like, okay. They say he's xenophobic. I was like, and I had nothing. And I had a moment where I was like, oh my God, I have Trump derangement syndrome. I was like, it's real. I have it. And I didn't even know where those ideologies came from. It had slowly just been impressed upon me like a software that's just downloading in the background by being on Facebook and being on Instagram. And I mean, everything was so left, like it was the left mainstream media narrative that was being pushed on everything, right? And they do a really good job of it too. Like they make you, it's a moral issue. If you don't believe this, then you're a bad person. You hate gay people. You hate people of color. You hate blah, blah. And it was like, well, I'm not that, right? So it was funny because that was a big moment where I realized like, oh shit, I have these ideas somehow downloaded into my operating system that I didn't even put there. It was almost like a virus. It's like malware that CNN installed into my brain, right? And so after that, I got a lot more involved. And I wouldn't say that I'm the most educated person on politics, by the way. I would say that I'm more strongly opinionated about general ideologies about freedom and liberty and freedom of speech and things like that. But I got a lot more involved in like challenging what I thought was true so that I had a more realistic view of what was going on.
Yeah. That's actually kind of crazy that that's what happened to you, because that is exactly the process that I went through also to a T, except instead of writing it down in a notebook, I put it in my notes on my iPhone or MacBook or whatever it was. Literally, that's exactly what I did. Was I was like, okay, what is wrong with Donald Trump here? Because I'm hearing he's the devil. Oh, he's a racist. Okay.
Right.
Exactly what you said. That's what they're saying. What do I think about that? And then I would do research, and I just had this list of things. And for me, it took, I was also not paying attention to politics before COVID, but I started to get pretty interested when I realized how impactful this could actually be on everyday American lives, which you know, I think when it's working right, it's just not that impactful. You know, like it's impactful to the extent that we're secure, the nation is safe, you can do business with each other, you can have these freedoms, but I don't think politics is supposed to have the impact on people that it had in from 2020 to 2024.
It should be in the background,
Exactly.
right? I shouldn't have to think about politics. Is our country safe? Are our borders secure? Is the government not robbing me of 50% of my income? Am I able to have a voice about things without being censored? Like, those are the main things that should be enforced by government. It shouldn't be a thing where we're just like, oh my God, what are they taking us from us now, right? Like, our founding fathers left Great Britain because of big government overreach. And now it's just one freedom at a time. It's been taken away and taken away and taken away until it seems like we're back in those times.
Yep.
It's crazy. And that's why it matters. Like, I don't think, like, in the past, I would have taken the exact same stance, and I did take the exact same stance. I was like, I don't follow politics. Why does it doesn't affect my life? Like, my income is not impacted by it. My freedoms aren't impacted by it. Who cares if it's George Bush or Al Gore who's in office? I go about my business, I do my thing, and it's whatever. But then it became a thing. Then it became an encroachment on how am I making money? How am I moving about? How am I doing business? You know, the censorship alone. My account gets censored because I share a right-wing media thing that gets shadow banned, and now my business is impacted because I run my business out of my social media. That's a problem.
Yep.
Right? And it's a direct violation of freedom of speech. And they're guising it under dangerous misinformation. Who's deciding what's misinformation?
Exactly.
I'm sorry. Is there like one judge that knows exactly what's true? How many things did they label misinformation? Oh, like the fact that maybe the virus came from a Wuhan lab in China, and it did. It was like that was labeled misinformation. You get kicked off of social media for that 4 years ago. So I get hot about it. Are you guys hot? I'm hot.
Yep.
Becca, curious, you just did a little bit of introspection on the evolution of your thought process related to Trump, and I'm curious how you think that you came to be someone who is able to critique their own thinking and then update their perceptions, and apparently to do so in an ongoing manner that, you know, has kind of pointed you more towards the direction that you know, some vision that you had for your life. So there's a couple things going on there, but I think one of the most fundamental is that you're willing to look at your thought processes, your frame, your inner landscape, your reality as you perceive it, and willing to consider that it might not be complete or that it might be flawed in some way, and willing to update it, because that's, I don't know what percentage of the population has the makeup to be able to do that, but it's certainly not everybody. And I'm curious if you point to a certain point in your life where you experienced something, or did you go through a season where you were forced to confront something, or what led you to be the kind of person who critically looks at your own framework and is willing to update it and willing to sacrifice your current perceptions for something that might be more true, better aligned to reality, et cetera?
That's such a powerful question. I'm thinking about that as you're asking. So I'm like, man, was there really a point? I think if you had asked anybody that knew me when I was a teenager and throughout my 20s, I was an extremely hard-headed, and I still am, but like very hard-headed, opinionated person that some people from the outside would probably say she has to be right all the time. It wasn't necessarily that. It was just, I get convicted about things, but I am willing to be wrong. Like, if I'm shown evidence that is compelling, I am willing to be wrong, right? But honestly, I would say, as you're asking me that question, I was thinking, I think it probably was more in like interpersonal relationships. Like, if you're in interpersonal relationships, whether it's romantic or a platonic friendship or whatever it is, and you're having a conflict or you're having a belief about something, like assuming the worst, or you're believing that the other person is angry at you, or because I have very codependent tendencies in that way. I think I started having to ask myself, okay, the story, it's funny because this is coming to mind. Brene Brown has a question that she always puts out there that was really powerful to me, or not a question, but it's a phrase. She'll say, anytime you're noticing yourself having an intrusive belief or thought, say, the story I'm telling myself is ... And then saying at the end of that, but is that true? just because you feel it and you're afraid and the emotion is really strong doesn't actually make it true. And so I honestly think it was relationships that started sparking that, where like if I had a conflict or something, or I was like, oh my God, the world is ending, this is ending, there's a bit, it was just like, okay, the story I'm telling myself is this. Is that true? Why do I think that? And really just starting to pull the thread on things. And then obviously I just got shoved off a cliff during COVID and forced to do it. And when I realized that one thing that I thought was clearly wrong, I was like, whoa, well, now I definitely have to be a lot more vigilant about questioning my beliefs, because we get, like I called it earlier, we get malware installed on our thinking a lot. And we'd be foolish to just be like, oh, there might not be another truth here.
Yeah, and I think, part of certainly the technological and informational revolutions have transformed humanity and have brought us, out of abject poverty, and we've pushed back, privation to the point where many of us don't really have to think that much about where our next meal is coming from. So there's a lot to be grateful for there, but there's also evidence that our kind of technological and well, the technological growth and prowess and power and all of that has run faster than our ability to, like, our meaning making and wisdom seeking apparatus hasn't been able to keep up with the technological explosion of tools and information. And so it's really easy for us to end up kind of odd and left field and getting our programming just downloaded without, being conscious of it whatsoever. We're very prone to, clever narratives. And I think people who, well, as marketers, most of us are marketers on this call. And it's like, how well, a story, a proper narrative frames a conversation and makes a certain data point more compelling. And I think the ability to kind of step back and examine your own framework and see whether it's mapped onto reality at a wisdom level it's a skill that's going to be crucial, especially in the age of AI and all the changes that are coming still. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think that's a good insight into kind of personal development.
Well, and the other thing that I'll add to that is, and this is kind of like a spiritual thing, it's like, we are not our beliefs, right? We are like, if you get too attached to your beliefs, you're going to feel very, very threatened and off kilter if somebody challenges them. And so once you realize, like, these are just ideas, and, Joe Rogan, even in his recent stand-up, he's like, he goes over this little bit where he's like, look, if I was you and I lived your life, I'd probably think exactly like you. And if you were me that lived and you lived my life, you'd probably think exactly like me. And understanding that, like, all we really are at our core is consciousness, without any personality, without any beliefs, without any ideas. Like, when we're born, we are just aware and alive. And then over time, because of our upbringing and our parents and our socioeconomic and our education and like our religion and all the things that get put on us, we develop this character. It's literally a character. I'm only Becca because of all the things that I've done. But if I was Austin, I'd be Austin. You know what I mean? And so, like, these things are not static. Like, beliefs can be changed, right? And so I think people have gotten way too attached to their beliefs to the point where they're not willing to even look at it and go, could I be wrong?
Yeah.
Because for them to be wrong, that takes away a piece of who they feel that they are.
Exactly right. I think that's such a great point. And the term that I heard this term from the tech community, which I don't know if that's where it originated or not, but those are some of the brightest minds out there. But the term is basically strong opinions held loosely. And I like that a lot. And that's what I've tried to sort of shift over to. Strong opinions held loosely, because you should have opinions. You should know what you think. But held loosely, if you realize that, oh, shoot, I'm still watching CNN and I'm actually still believing everything that they're saying, now would be a good time to revisit that. Do you think, Becca, that COVID was on purpose to, and if so, was it related to getting Trump out of there? Was it related to pushing the vaccine on everyone, which I believe was the most profitable medical product ever sold? Maybe I don't know about the most profitable product ever sold, but it was definitely the most, I think it was the highest grossing medical thing ever sold. Or was it an unfortunate accident that they then capitalized on? What do you think was behind it?
I'm actually trying to find a screenshot because I thought that I took it this morning. It appears to have been on purpose, and here's why I say that. Bill Gates bought like millions of shares of BioNTech before COVID ever kicked off. And then COVID kicked off, which by the way was Pfizer. I think BioNTech was Pfizer. And then COVID kicks off. They sell like millions or billions of the vaccine, right? And then he sold those shares for like I might be misquoting. I think it's $242 billion is what he profited off of that. So where'd you get that intel, bud?
Yeah.
You just randomly, like a few months before all this happened, like you're like, oh, you know what? Pfizer sounds pretty good. I'm gonna so like follow the money. I mean, that's what we always say, right? Follow the money. It seems to have been pretty coordinated. And it was by rich people who want to be richer and have some weird sadistic obsession with control and power. That's what it seems like.
Well, the three undeniable outcomes from it: one, Trump did not go into a second term, which he absolutely otherwise would have. Two, rich people got way, way, way richer. And three, they were able to generate this vaccine very, very quickly and make it so safe, so fast. It was actually so shocking. And sell, the highest grossing medical product line ever. Those three things are undeniable. So now whether they were happy coincidences, whether they were good people just trying to do their best to contain it, I'm not speaking to the motive. I'm just saying those three things absolutely did happen.
Yep. Pretty weird coincidences.
Yep. Austin, anything you want to point out with COVID or talk to Becca about before we move on?
No, let's move on.
Okay, vaccines. Did you, if you don't mind me asking, did you go for the vaccine? What was your initial thought on the vaccine? What is your thought now?
Hell no. I did not go for the vaccine. No, I was, and listen, I'm not like, I didn't have any stance on vaccines before this. I really didn't. I never thought about it. Like, whatever. Vaccines just were not something that I thought about, just like politics were not something that I thought about. However, again, I was doing the math on it. I was like, first of all, I've already had it. I have antibodies. Why do I need to get a vaccine for something I've already had? Why do I need to get a vaccine for something that I have a 0.0004 or whatever it was % chance of dying from? Like, it didn't add up. Why should I get it? And then the fact that they were forcing it on people so much, they were even bribing people. Get free burgers at White Castle, get free lottery tickets, get free donuts to get this vaccine. It made it super suspicious. I was like, no way. So no, I did not take it. And good luck trying to make me. I run my own business. Like apart from restricting my travel, which I got around that too, because I'm a delinquent, I was not going to take it. But yeah, I wasn't like an anti-vax or anything before. Am I thinking a lot more about vaccines now? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, same. Did you guys, I'm just curious with the people you knew, did any of you guys, even Miller or Austin, did you guys know people with injuries from the vaccine or even deaths?
I don't know of anybody that specifically died from the vaccine. You hear situations where every time somebody young dies unexpectedly from some heart complication, I'm always like, I wonder, if they were, I wonder if they had the vaccine. But it's kind of gauche to ask, in that situation, so you don't. But
exactly.
I don't know of anybody offhand.
How about
deaths? Deaths, no, but someone who was affected by it, yeah.
Really? Did you, Becca?
I'll be honest. I don't actually know that many people that I know that got vaccinated in my circle. Like it wasn't, the vast majority of people didn't get vaccinated in my circle.
Yeah. My therapist has heart problems from it. I have a girlfriend who's like 23 or 27 or something. She's not really a girlfriend. She's more of an acquaintance, but she's in the roofing business. She is super fit. She's an athlete. She had like 2 heart attacks. And when they went in, they were like, it's from the vaccine. Like the nurse told her, she's like, did you get vaccinated? And she's like, yeah. And my ex-boyfriend's uncle, 2 exes ago, died after getting the vaccine. So like and what is it? The myocarditis risk in children like went up to like one in, gosh, I don't want to misquote because I don't want to sound like an idiot. I have it written down somewhere, but it was like significantly more. In fact, there were 0 cases of myocarditis in children before the vaccine, and now they have cases in children, and they're trying to normalize it. If you go on like the CDC website, I can't remember exactly what I read, but they're trying to make it sound like myocarditis is like a prevalent thing.
Yeah.
Like you've probably all seen the compilations of like soccer players and athletes literally just like hitting the ground after,
Yep.
they're having strokes, they're having heart attacks. Like it's crazy. Oh, but that's been happening before. Show me.
Yeah,
Show me
exactly.
what's been happening before.
Yeah, there was 2 things that stand out to me related to COVID and the vaccine. One is, and I just remember this distinctly because I was, because of what I was doing for work over this period of time and who I was around. But from January to, I would say, June, let's call it a 4 to 6 month stretch there in 2022, early 22. I have 5 kids, and my wife is super healthy and cares a lot about it and has changed my shifted my thinking on this over the almost 20 years we've been together. Because at first I thought this was like crazy, crunchy, like ridiculous stuff, and you can just eat the food. Like, I'm sure it's fine. Turns out, no, that's all wrong. Anyhow, we tend to be pretty healthy, thank God. I'm very grateful for that. But it's partly due to my wife caring so much about it and feeding good food and taking care of the kids, But there was a 4 to 6 month stretch in early 22. We were sick more than I have ever been in the time that we have had kids, which is about 14 years. People at work were getting sick. It was absurd. So I've always thought it had to have something to do with the vaccine because it wasn't like that prior and it wasn't like that since. There was just this weird 4 to 6 month window where it just seemed like everyone kept getting sick, including our family, which was very abnormal. But unfortunately, I do know, I mean, I know I've said this before, maybe not on this podcast, but I bought a motorcycle because this guy's best friend, who was 60 years old with no prior health consequences at all, got a vaccine and 2 weeks later was dead. And then his best friend was like, well, my best friend's dead. We've rode motorcycles forever. And so I'm going to sell mine too. And I bought his motorcycle. I started like, it wasn't just vaccine. Okay, Patrick, to your point, with a lot of these, you don't ask if they were vaccinated. It's kind of untowards, to do so. But I don't know about you guys, but I was hearing about so many unexpected sudden deaths also for a little season there. And I have not heard of any recently, and I had never heard of this before. And I started to make a list in my Apple Notes. I started to make a list of like weird sudden deaths, like an 18-year-old died in his apartment, no prior health conditions. Well, that's really, really weird. Like, I had never heard of that before, like a 50-year-old, no priors, heart attack. What, so I'm suspicious. Let's put it that way. I'm really suspicious about a lot of these sudden, unexplained deaths because it just wasn't ever a thing. And it's not been a thing recently, but it was a thing over a period of time there. And the only thing that was different in the grand scheme of things was this brand new vaccine, which was safe and effective and everyone was getting.
Okay, so did you guys ever listen to like Peter McCullough or Brett Weinstein
Sure.
and like Pierre Corey and Robert Malone on Joe Rogan?
All of the above.
Yep.
I mean, if anybody hasn't listened to those podcasts, you have to. Especially, I believe it was the Robert Malone one because he was talking about like the interactions between the mRNA technology and like, especially if somebody had COVID and then got the vaccine and then got COVID again, they were way sicker. And I don't know the science behind it. You're gonna have to listen to his explanation. But I did find the statistic, one of the myocarditis statistics. So check this out. The latest analysis shows that myocarditis is now running at 25,000 per million. And it used to be 4 in a million.
Oh no. What does it say what age, or is this everyone?
It doesn't say what age there. And then it also says, but there is a thing here that says occurrence and features of childhood myocarditis, a nationwide study in Finland. I can't see what I had only screenshotted that part though. But that's what it just says overall. And I do remember seeing another thing somewhere. I have it saved or I've shared it on like my Instagram, but it was showing that childhood cases of myocarditis were literally non-existent. There were no cases of childhood myocarditis, and now they have myocarditis in children.
Yeah.
And the other crazy shit was, okay, they're literally, how stupid can people be? They're showing us on TV like the statistics, whatever those, however twisted those might have been, but it was showing like in children and babies are not really even contracting, spreading, or getting very sick from COVID. Then why do we need to vaccinate them?
Well, their target
And if
market,
you,
their customers.
why do we need?
Yeah.
Right. Well, yeah,
Customer.
exactly. Customers. Well, more bodies we can sell them to. That's more.
Exactly. No, I think that's really what
It
it
was-
came down to was let's get this in as many people as we possibly can and make it pretty much a worldwide thing. But
Yeah.
I
Pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
Make a product everybody has to buy,
right.
and they have to keep buying it over and over, or they can't live.
Yep, exactly.
Gotta give it to them.
I'm curious on censorship. This one, this one might matter a lot to you also if you have a strong sense of personal freedom. It really matters to me. Like this one is like, I guess when I see stuff on X, when I see stuff from CNN, MSDNC, ABC, all this, like the censorship stuff, and even with the FBI getting involved with Facebook and back when it was Twitter, and this one really like gets me because I guess personally I just feel like, well, if they can feed us any information they want, then a good chunk of us, not all of us ever, but a good chunk of us are going to actually believe it, and then they're going to be able to cause us to do what they want us to do. And it almost, to me, I just envision like everyone just walking into jail, together and being happy about it, or into tyranny or whatever. Because you do have to have free speech, and as it turns out. So I'm just curious with censorship for you. I mean, you had mentioned it had an impact even on your business. How do you feel about it personally? And more specifically, where do you think things would have gone if their censorship would have went unchecked? And where do you think it goes from here?
So, first of all, freedom of speech is probably the foundational, most important freedom that we have, because without being able to speak up about anything, we can't change anything. Right? So again, here's Thomas Jefferson. I'm like a quote master, but Thomas Jefferson said, I may not agree with what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And I genuinely feel that way. I don't care what blue-haired, non-binary, pansexual, whatever they want to call themselves, person wants to say some crazy shit. I may not agree with what they say, but they can say it, right? But when we start to censor one side and not everybody is enraged, I should be enraged if the crazy extremist liberals are being silenced. And I would be. I don't want them to be silenced, but I want to make sure that we both have a voice. And there was an active, organized attack on censoring and shadowing and silencing and banning any voices that were going against the mainstream media, which just so happened to be more conservative values. That's terrifying. And I don't care what side you're on, whether you're blue or red or right or left, that should enrage every single person, because it might not be you this time, but what if it's you next time?
Right.
So that one's the craziest. I can't even believe that it's an issue that we have to defend.
But Austin, let me pull you in on this. Why do you think the left has such a hard time wrapping their head around that? Because they were all in, it seems like, on censorship over the last 4 years. And, to some degree, you can kind of see why they would at least not push against it because it was in their favor. But Becca just said, at some point, it's going to work the other direction and it's going to work exactly against you. What is so hard about seeing the truth of that?
I mean, it's who you surround yourself with. Like, as she's talking, I watched, I don't know if you watched the interview that Elon Musk did with Don Lemon.
I saw some
They
clips.
did it on the X platform. I watched the whole thing. It's very, very interesting. And I think Elon said on there that when he bought Twitter, 97% of the employees were like liberal. And so, I mean, 1,000 people choose to believe something doesn't make it the truth. But if you're in power, which they were, I mean, they kicked Trump off of Twitter, off of Facebook, and you know, I think it has to do with it's who you surround yourself with. Like, I live in a blue state and intermingle with a lot of, you know, people that are now Republicans. And it's interesting if you hear, it's like Becca was saying earlier, before you know it, you're believing some of the things people are saying just because it's on repeat. It's soundtracks. It's playing in the back of my mind. And so I think about that a lot. Proximity. I mean, who you have proximity to. I like to have opposing views. Like, I don't like to just be in my own bubble. And I have, you know, people on way, you know, both ends of the spectrum. You know, I hear the far right side and, you know, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, and buy the gasoline, we're going to lose power. It's a smokescreen. Trump's actually still president. Like, obviously that didn't happen. You know, but then I hear the whole other side of it, and I'm like, man, somewhere in here there's got to be a balance. So I don't know. I think it has to do with who you surround yourself with and who you allow to speak into your life.
Yeah, the echo chamber thing is a real thing, and it could be, you know, if you're on the left, and let's say you're kind of in an echo chamber, and then you sort of get to the point where you're thinking, you know what, actually a certain amount of censorship is needed because a lot of Americans are dumb and uneducated and unsafe, and this is what we need for a safe society. And is it not interesting the things they tell us and try to get us to believe, to like pull the wool over our eyes? Like, that's what I see.
It's wild. Just go watch that interview if you have an hour, because even the way that it was very educational for me watching Don Lemon speak. Like, he was basically putting pressure on Elon to censor, and Elon was pushing back on him, saying, "You want censorship?" He said, "No. I want moderation." And Elon's like, moderation is a propaganda word for censorship.
Yeah.
And just called him on it. Like, it was,
Yes.
I was like, woohoo,
Yeah.
say it louder for the people in the back. Like,
Well, this is a big one because this to me seems like this is kind of like a trailhead for a lot of other stuff, because if they can censor us, then they can get us to do, hey, maybe they can get us all to take vaccines. If they can censor us, then they can, you know, there's a lot of things downstream. Well, almost everything is downstream of censorship. So this one seems like they're going to pull out all the stops, and they have pulled out all the stops, not just in limiting some of the viewpoints from the more center right side of things, but also in the case of Hunter Biden's laptop story, not allowing a true story to get out. So not only were they tamping down, you know, people not fitting their narrative that were saying things that didn't fit their narrative, but then they also made sure to let true stories not get out either. So it was, and that's what's going to happen if they're allowed to do it.
The next
why
landscape.
Are they so quiet though? Like, why is it? I mean, is it just me, or is that whole thing behind us now? Or are they just planning the next thing? Like, someone tell me.
Well,
I think the next landscape for censorship, I was listening to Mark Andreessen, who's been making his rounds on the podcasts, and he talks about the current administration's efforts at censoring AI and the way that they try to intervene in the development of AI, not purely from a safety standpoint, but really from a censorship standpoint. And it was one of the things that made Andreessen switch his loyalty from the Democratic Party to support Trump, was he saw how dangerous that is if the prevailing power structure basically says, oh, AI is going to be developed by these 2 or 3 companies. We're going to control them, and we're going to control the narrative. That was basically the underlying attitude in the administration. And that, if you bend AI certainly has its risks. And if you bend it away from pursuing what's true at a kind of at the level of reality, and you teach it to lie, like you've just ruined it, and you might have ruined everything.
Right.
It's really dangerous to start going down that road. And I think, people who might have been agnostic to kind of left-right politics before kind of start seeing everybody has a break point or an issue where this kind of becomes relevant. And for Andreessen, it was the censorship on the AI side.
Yeah. This is a little bit of a sidebar, Becca, but do you use AI on a daily or weekly basis in your work?
I wouldn't say that I use it on a daily, weekly. I have used Chat GPT a handful of times. My problem is like creativity is like my lifeblood.
Yeah.
And so passing something off, like I would never have AI write my sales copy or my sales content or anything like that's so personal to me, like creating something out of my head. But for shit that I don't know how to do, and I'm just like, ask Chat GPT, brilliant.
Yeah.
I should be leveraging it a lot more, honestly.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, I don't use it a ton. I just have ChatGPT, and I was talking to it today, and I found it pretty helpful. My wife accidentally got into started a sourdough bread business in Nashville 4 years ago, and I was actually asked.
Oh, sourdough bread.
Yeah, yeah. So now it's kind of a thing, and it's all she can do to keep up with it. But I was asking ChatGPT today for ideas on basically for high margin product line ideas for baked and free for my wife's thing. And she had some pretty good ideas. And then I was like, well, let's just see what she says. So I asked her what the margins are for sourdough. Nailed it. And she does not have access to our books. But she has enough of industry data to know what the gross margins are for sourdough bread. I mean, she was right on. It was kind of impressive.
Yeah.
All right, Becca, let's talk about this new day in America, because I don't know what you felt there in Colorado or what you felt with those kind of around you or what you in your life or your contacts or relationships or whatever, what the vibe was for you when the election was over. But I will say, I felt a pretty strong sense of relief kind of in a lot of people around me. And I would say maybe even Nashville, it just in general, it kind of felt like everyone was like, kind of just took a little bit of like a sigh and kind of let out the wind a little bit, and just relaxed a little bit. It felt like the anxiety came down a little bit. It just felt like there was a new day dawning in America. I'm curious if that was your perception also. And if so, what would you kind of personally identify as like the brightest spots or the brightest parts of this new day dawning in America?
So I'll tell you, it's so funny you use those words because, first of all, I felt a palpable energy the few days leading up to the election where I just knew we were going to win. I was like, I feel it coming. I even had a dream, actually. I have like prophetic dreams. That's a different conversation for a different time. But I had a dream and I was like, this is going to go our way. And I literally felt as excited as a child on Christmas Eve in the election. I was like, yes, because it has been this bizarre political climate of like, first of all, demonizing and vilifying the regular ass, white, straight, conservative or religious person, right? Like somehow we became Nazis and fascists and racists and all these things. And it was crazy. Like it was a felt experience to just feel like white guilt was pushed on us and things like that. Like I really did genuinely experience that. And I was like, this sucks. Like I don't like living in this world that we're in now where somehow like I am bad just for being born in the body that I am or the color that I am, right? Or for the political views that I have. And that was really stressful to be in, or to be called privileged every 5 fucking minutes by somebody who, well, your privilege is showing like this. And it's like, okay, like everything that I have was just handed to me. It didn't work for anything. Like those things just became such an overbearing energy that were really bothersome. But yeah, after the election, I really felt like, holy shit, this could be one of those, like when we look back, a major turning point in history, where we were going down a path where people were literally going to lose the chance to speak. And we were believing crazy stuff like the gender ideology stuff. Oh my God. Like all of that was absolute craziness. And it just felt like, here's what I will say. The environment they did such a good job making you feel like if you opposed any of those things, you were this big in a sea of this that opposed you. And when the election ended and you got to see all of that
Yeah.
red, I was like, dude, it felt like coming out of the closet.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, I'm a conservative, like you know what I mean? So yeah, it was a huge relief. Like I feel really excited about what's happening. I'm really excited that Elon Musk is on board. I'm really excited about Doge and the accountability and transparency that's going to be taking place with government spending. That's one of the things I'm the most excited about. But yes, absolutely. It was a huge relief. I feel really excited, and I'm excited for America right
Yeah,
now.
I totally agree. What's your take on the Maha movement? Have you been following much of that at all?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Like, I think it's awesome that we're finally going to be asking questions about what's in our food. Like, that should be something that everybody cares about. I don't care what side of the fence that you're on, right? Like, why do we have so many chemicals in our food? Why do we have unnecessary food dyes? Like, why aren't we investigating the link between the 29 vaccines? Like, I think it was they added 27 or 28 or something like that vaccines in 1989 to the child's schedule. Now they're getting like, why aren't we looking into, are these things necessary? What are the long-term harmful effects? What are the links to things like autism or whatever they want to link it to? Like, why are we just condemned and called anti-vaxxers if we want to look into what the data actually says, right? So I really am excited about Robert Kennedy Jr. I think that he is a good person. Like, I get really good vibes from the guy. I think he's sincere. I think it's awesome. And to look into things like chemtrails, is that okay that we're just spraying chemical? Like, when I look outside some days, it's gridlocked, the sky out here, it's
Hmm.
crazy. So yeah, I think that those are fundamental things that all human beings should be concerned about, is our health. We have an obesity epidemic here in this country, we have a disease epidemic here, we have a mental health epidemic, and it's all profitable to the people who are in big pharma and big food and the government and the big insurance companies, right? So it's just, I think it's a good thing. I'm excited.
I agree. I totally agree. Let me ask you this, because this is something I'm having a really hard time wrapping my head around. So after Trump, in the weeks after the election, right? I mean, it's only been whatever, it's been a month and a half now, but I mean, almost immediately when that thing was over, that you could have thrown a dart up in the air and it would have landed on some positive change, right? Like, I mean, you had Hamas wanting to renew peace talks. You had Putin wanting to, and Zelensky ready to engage in peace talks. You had things immediately starting to, like, all of a sudden, you had some things that were like, oh, we can actually do things at the border so terrorists can't just walk across. You had the food system getting ready to be, I mean, it was just like positive change after positive change. And again, you throw a dart up in the air and it would land on some sort of positive change. And at the same time, there is a subset of people in Nashville that I would describe as historically conservative, very well educated, and Christian values, and think to this day that Kamala would have been the better choice. And that is something that I have a hard time wrapping my head around, because it's just like so sort of difficult to understand.
Yeah.
And look, if we were talking about, back in the days of, well, what of George W. or Al Gore, you know what I mean? Like, that seems more like almost in some ways a 6 one way and half a dozen another. But no, you had
Yeah.
Trump and you had Kamala, and you don't know things about Kamala that I don't already know. I mean, it seems like all the info is out there. And you still think, and you're a historic conservative, and you still think Kamala would have been the better choice. I don't get it. I don't understand it. The one thing I will say about this subset is that they still seem to believe mainstream media because they consume it and they go on it when they get the opportunity.
Yeah.
So that to me says a lot. That explains a lot, because if you're going to be all those things that I mentioned, that would historically not go for Kamala at all, but now you're saying Kamala would have been the better choice. You know, if you're going to consume and go on mainstream media and fall in line with that actually does explain a lot. But I guess I'm just wondering if you had to steel man the case for Kamala, like, I understand you didn't think she was the best choice, but if you had to put yourself in the shoes of those that did, like, what would you point to? Where would you go with that?
Kent, I literally cannot steelman Kamala Harris. Charlie Kirk does a really great job showcasing this when he asks people, what is Kamala Harris's greatest accomplishment? And literally nobody can say anything. It's like, I don't know that I can. I genuinely am not being facetious when I say that. I don't have, if I was trying to be a good debate person, be like, okay, make an argument for the other side, I genuinely cannot.
Yes.
That's my answer.
Okay.
Final answer.
Okay. Hey, fair enough. If I were to take a stab at it, I would probably go with Trump is bad, like at all costs. So it doesn't matter who's running against Trump. It cannot be Trump.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't care if it's freaking Joe Biden, who's dead, or Kamala, who is apparently going to do everything that Joe has been doing and things haven't been going well. Who cares? Like, it doesn't matter who the other person is. It just cannot be Trump. I'm assuming that's somewhere in their thought process. That's kind of a guess, but it seems like that has
But
to
again,
be,
that's not-
it has, that piece sort of has to be part of the computation in their mind. Otherwise it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. But again, that's not a logical reason still. That's just
It's not accomplishment.
that's like a, yeah. That's still just well, that's not a reason for Kamala to be in Harris, or for Kamala to be in office. It's just a reason for Donald Trump not to be in office.
Correct.
That's still not a supporting reason for Kamala. So next.
Yeah.
Yeah, I watched those videos too, and like, I was waiting because I was interested. I was like, okay, what did she actually do?
Give me something.
Like,
Yeah.
let's not talk about. It's not Donald Trump running; it's someone else running. What did she do in the 4 years? What has she done? And it was just silence.
Yeah.
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 Um,
Yeah. I withheld judgment on that for a while because I just didn't know. I didn't know her. And so I was like, well, I'm going to wait, I'm going to let the weeks turn into months a little bit here and let's see what the situation is. And then, we've talked about it before, but I mean, the conclusion I've gone to is just that she's got to be one of the worst presidential candidates to ever run for the office of all time. And Joe it's hard. I mean, he has to be one of the worst presidents of all time, certainly the worst president of our lifetimes. So, yeah, I do think this subset that I'm talking about is going to be proven wrong, because I think enough of good things will come out in the coming years that in hindsight, it's just going to be kind of irrefutable.
yeah.
So, I mean, that's my take on it, but
I think we're heading in a good direction as long as the deep state doesn't kill the man.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, what are the chances at this point, like, that Trump actually gets inaugurated? I'm optimistic, obviously, and I think we are. I'm optimistic about the direction that things are headed in, but I think the kind of unsettledness that I feel when I read the news about these unidentified drone swarms that are over, different cities, and I'm thinking, I don't know what that is or what it's about, but it does make me think, things like, well, it wouldn't be outside of the deep state's purview to launch some kind of false flag attack between now and Inauguration Day, put us under martial law. I'm generally that's not where my mind likes to go. But, I mean, that's basically what the CIA does, that kind of thing, nation building, and, it wouldn't be outside of their purview to try to do it here.
Yeah. I mean, that is something that I read. Like, what they could possibly do is, it's like he probably used the wrong words here, but it's like a military continuity thing. Like, if they decide that there's a war issue or whatever, then they don't change.
Prevent the transfer of power and all that.
Right. Yeah. But, God, I mean, I don't know. Is it possible? Yes. I'm not going to put a whole lot of energy worrying about it. I'm hoping that that's not something that happens. And
Don't you think it's too obvious? I mean, like, don't you think that no matter what they do, like,
yeah,
77
Yeah,
million people are
and-
going to know? Like,
So I think we've talked about this, on this show before, but the idea that after every pandemic in history, there's a shift to the right because people get more concerned, even at a like biological level, they're more concerned about the kind of boundaries between things, and they're concerned about, they become a little more focused on protecting what we have and not having people from outside the tribe come into this tribe and all of that. It activates this kind of behavioral immune system that we have. So looking at just the data from what happens after pandemics, one could infer that there would be a generation of Republican or conservative leadership coming up. And I do think that's the case. I think we're in for 20 years of conservative leadership in America. So whether it's Trump or Vance or Ramaswamy or you name it, I think we're, headed the right direction for probably a generation. So
what if this was just a huge blessing in disguise?
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
may turn out to be that way.
That's how I like to think
I
about
think it's
it.
entirely possible.
If they ran the pandemic as this kind of game theory to try to, get us under kind of Chinese totalitarian lockdown, they really screwed the pooch on that deal.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
it backfired.
Absolutely. Thank God.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the transfer of power thing because of war, I mean, that's what's happening in Ukraine right now. Zelensky was up for re-election during this war, and they postponed that. But I think where it would have made the most, created the most chaos was when the bullet nicked his ear. Because apparently that he had not identified the VP yet, or had he? But it had something to do with the RNC, Republican National Convention. Like, basically, if they would have actually got him that night in Butler, PA, then if I'm not mistaken on this, the VP pick wasn't yet locked in yet, and it would have sort of created an even more chaotic scenario than what happened with Biden Harris, because Biden dropped out and Harris slipped in, and anyone paying attention is not a fan of that. That's not the way this process is supposed to work. So if Trump would have been shot right before the RNC, they would have had to almost like open it up to everyone, and it would have just been chaos. So at this point, yeah, I sure hope it doesn't happen, and a lot of good probably that will come from Trump's next 4 years. Some of that good will not happen if he gets killed between now and inauguration, but I don't think it would lead to the amount of chaos that would have led to if he'd have been killed in Butler. And I'm still hoping it doesn't happen. All right, Becca. Hey, thanks for doing this. This is a lot of fun. A lot of fun. I appreciate it. I want to get your thoughts on one last thing, and then we'll let you go. Health. Health seems important to you. Physical health, spiritual health, mental health, etc. How do you think about the connection between your physical health and your overall mindset?
It's huge, actually. I learned a long time ago, is like, if you can conquer your body, you can pretty much do anything. Like, and when I say conquer your body, what I really mean is if you can get into the same habits, mindsets, and practices that are absolutely necessary to have a fit, physical, healthy body, those are the same habits and principles without a whole lot of thinking, right? Like, health is about the easiest thing. It's like, I do this, like caveman, lift weights, eat eggs, do those things. If you can apply those same practices to the more complex things in your life, it's a recipe for success. And you cannot be effective if you don't feel good in your body. Like, if I feel like shit, if I'm tired, my energy's low, I'm fat, I'm weak, right? So I always looked at people who didn't take care of their physical health as, I just saw weakness. Like, you can't control what you do with your body. You can't control what you're putting in your body. Like, if you can't do that, you're never going to succeed at other areas of your life. So taking care, it's a discipline. Like, discipline is such an important virtue, really, in the anatomy of success, right? Like, you have to be able to consistently do things that you might not feel motivated to do. And if you can do that in every area of your life, you're going to kick ass. So feeling good, being in good shape, feeling healthy, having energy, and then applying those disciplines to every other area of your life is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I totally agree. Hey, what do you eat on a consistent basis, if you don't mind me asking?
you're not going to like this answer. I eat what I call the poverty diet most of the time. I eat the exact same things every single day. You're not going to like this. I wake up, I have tea. I don't really drink coffee unless I'm absolutely dragging ass like later in the day. I work out. I have my protein shake. I usually will snack on like cottage cheese or this protein cereal that I have called Catalina Crunch, like throughout the day in between calls, or like these right now I've been on a prosciutto mozzarella rolls kick. And then I'll eat like eggs. I do a big ass green smoothie every single day. And that's what I eat. I eat those same things every single day. And then I have something that I call Fatter Day, which is my cheat day. And I'll usually go out on Saturday and get like pad thai and do whatever, like sushi, or I'll just eat whatever I'm craving that day. But most of the time I'm very militant. It keeps it easy for me.
And how about dinner? Was dinner included with all the things that you mentioned there?
Yeah, it's mostly snacking where I have like eggs.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you were wrong in that.
I'm 5'4". I don't have a lot of room to eat lots of calories.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you were wrong in that I would hate it. It's actually not that far from what I mean. I'm not doing tea, and my stomach can't handle protein shakes, but I pretty much eat the same thing every day, and it's eggs, yogurt, cheese stick, beef stick, and then whatever is for dinner, but it's mostly protein. So
Absolutely. Cool. It keeps it easy.
exactly. Yeah, I have no problem eating for utility. Like 90% of the time, I just eat to stay alive, eat to feel good, and then 10% of the time, I want to go spend that money and eat something good.
I do love good food. It's just that the trade-off is if I love good food every day, I will be Rosie
Yeah.
O'Donnell. Okay. No offense.
Yeah. All right, Becca. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the podcast. We really appreciate it. Maybe to wrap up, do you want to let everyone know kind of where you're at with your website or websites or social or whatever?
So you can look me up on Instagram, either Becca_Switzer or at Roof Sales Mastery. And then my website is roofsalesmastery.com. And you can find me Roof Sales Mastery on YouTube. And I'm all over the place. You'll find me. I'm not hard to find.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Becca. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
It was nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you too. And I hope you guys have an awesome rest of the week and very Merry Christmas.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you.
Same to you. All right, guys. Our first guest on the show, Becca Switzer. That was fun.
Yeah, it's good to have her. Thanks for inviting her.
Absolutely. Any wrap-up thoughts you guys have on it?
It was interesting to hear her perspective, especially as somebody who it sounds like she shares a lot of the same kind of socio-political framework that maybe most of us do. We didn't really get into the entrepreneurial side of things all that much with her, but I am curious about her business a little bit and about how she, what part, and maybe like how much of her business is selling her information products and how much of it is is she doing like lead gen for other roofing company? I'm in the digital marketing game, so I was interested in that a little bit. We didn't really get to it, but do you know anything about that for her, her business?
To my knowledge, she doesn't do any lead gen for roofing companies, and I could be wrong on that, but from what I understand, she's making a living with her roof sales mastery class and online, basically her online courses,
sales reps.
Her online courses and online training for sales reps for the roofing industry, I think, is how she makes an income, and I think she does pretty good for herself. It's pretty cool to see, someone young like that, college dropout, driven, entrepreneurial, and just highly successful. I'm not sure.
Okay,
but
she's young, man.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think she's 40. So it's very cool to see because, for every 10 people that want to make money selling something online like that, 9 of them probably don't make it. And she seems like she's handling her success extremely well. And it's just really cool to see.
I agree.
Yeah, I like her energy. Like, I have noticed that, boy, how do I say this? There's good salesmen and the great salesmen, and the ones that are great, their energy is just another level. And like I see that in the industry that I'm in, working with people, and oddly enough, the ones with the best energy are women.
Interesting.
And that's my observation. I'm not making a blanket statement. I'm just telling you what I observe. And I think we have a lot to learn from at least women with that personality. But like she's talking in the beginning and I'm just getting jazzed. I'm like, man, she is making me believe in me because of how she believes in herself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I love about it is that like I'm kind of like pumped up. Like I'm like, let's go sell tomorrow. Like, and that's like, that's the it factor. Like that's the thing that we all want, but we don't all have. I think you have it or you don't. And if you have it and you know it and you develop it, it was interesting hearing her views and all that. But honestly, for me, going back to the beginning of the conversation, is hearing her story and her success. Like I was stoked. I'm like, this is ringing bells all over
Yeah.
for me. Like I just love hearing stories like that and feeling the non-tangibles. I don't even know how to describe it. Just
the energy. But Austin, don't you think it's two things? It's maybe you're born with it, or it's just kind of you're innately like that. It's a personality trait maybe to some degree. But don't you think it's also the wear-off effect from being successful? Like when you have success in your life based on your own definition, that tends to, I always felt like that tends to sort of just wear off on other people in a way that you can't always totally control or identify. But it just has that wear off effect. Like when things are going well in your own life, that just people can tell.
It does. I 100% agree. Yeah. Maybe that's it. Yeah.
And maybe it's not that they can tell, but you tend to have a more positive or maybe motivating effect on other people's success. That's probably the right way to define it.
Put out a different aura.
Yeah.
I mean, just put out like people just, you're magnetic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just something about it. It's just, yeah.
Her journey to arriving at her thoughts that she would currently have now on Trump and was just, I guess, I resonated a lot with that. Because, I mean, I know I just said it, but that's literally what I did. And there was a season of time there, I don't know when exactly this was, but there was like a stretch there where, like, multiple times I would go back and just be like, okay, all right, I get, like, everyone's saying Trump is bad for all these reasons. But at least I'm hearing it from mainstream. What do I think, you know? And then I would do research and I would look into it and I'd have a hard time arriving at the conclusions that they were arriving at. And then I would let it go for a while. And then I would revisit it again because it was almost like cognitive dissonance. It was like something is not matching up. Something is not making sense, you know? And after revisiting it like fairly significantly 2 or 3 times, and then I kind of arrived at, okay, I see what is going on here, which is the most recent version is he's a Nazi. He's not a Nazi. And a lot of them were saying it, the news and the people on the left, and he's just not. And so that speaks to the other stuff that they were saying in the years prior, where I just had to finally realize they're just lying. They're just lying, and they're overextending themselves on a lot of areas. But they weren't all doing that all of the time, because I have no problem with someone bringing forth like positing a well thought out critique. That's great, you know. And there were some people doing that too, but by and large, it was not that at all. It just didn't make sense to me until it did.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Any other thoughts as we wrap up here?
Well, I was kind of at the same place as you, Kent. I just did not. I was almost a never Trumper, you know, and I just could not see any scenario in which I would vote for Trump until this last election, you know, and I don't know when. Well, I was going to vote for RFK if he was on the ballot, but we all know how that went. But by the time the election came around, I didn't even have to hold my nose to go vote for Trump, really. Like I was fine with it, you know. And it's not that the things that I didn't like about Trump were necessarily untrue. It's just that I think I just saw in more clarity kind of how what the consequences were of, going the other direction.
Yeah.
Like I always kind of, like Becca mentioned, actually, is like, I always kind of thought, well, whoever the president is, like, I prided myself in living a life that was, pretty much disconnected from whoever the president was. Like, my life was going to be fine no matter who's in office.
Yeah.
And I thought it was weak to think that, whoever's in office would have anything to do with my own happiness or success. And I still kind of would orient myself that way. But I did see how, like, tangibly Biden screwed a lot of things up, and that things are objectively worse across many different fronts. In some cases, so much worse that it's difficult to quantify. And I thought, Kamala is just, basically what happens when it's like almost when some of these things kind of unfold, it's funny. It's almost like the universe is playing a joke where it's kind of, I see your little stupidity, and I'm just going to, like, expand it into the biggest possible stupid balloon that you could possibly inflate. And, it's so distorted that it was almost funny. And it's what happens when the affirmative action hire ends up, running for president.
Right.
And it's one thing when you have an affirmative action student who can't make it through a tough class in university. Like, that's no good for the student or the university. But to run them for president, this just highlights it at a whole other level. And when I saw that, I was just like, yeah, no, I don't have any problem at all voting for Trump.
Yeah. Hey, what did you guys think about in her sales process? One of the pieces of advice that she has was to be on the offense and not on the defense with objections. Do you, Austin, do that? Do you bring objections to your buyers before they're raising them? Patrick, are you doing that? As she was talking, I was thinking through, like, to myself what that means for me, selling Amish-made structures. And I'm not exactly sure. I need to put more thought into it, like how I could do that more. But I'm just kind of curious if you guys are already doing that or what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I do it all the time. When she said it, I was like, oh, yeah.
You do it verbally or you do
they
it
start
in email? How do you do it?
Oh, most of it's in person.
Okay.
Like, it's usually when there's objections about the process and how it's done. And I've been doing it for so long now that I know what all the objections are. So I usually just, instead of letting them bring it up, I bring it up.
What would be some of these
I'm like-
objections and how do you go about this?
Well, just practically, like, they're like, well, let's talk about price for one thing.
Okay.
Like, where do we got to land price point wise? I'm like, okay, this is probably listed at, I'm just generally speaking, this is probably listed at market value. This just went on the market. Is it worth this? Well, probably not. But let me tell you what I've seen on the other side, because I've been on the other side of this thing where I'm representing the seller. I'm talking about when I'm representing a buyer. I've seen the offers come in, and this house mirrors another one down the road, and I've had 3, 4, 5, 6 offers that go 10, 20, 30% over the asking. So I've seen them. I hear your objections. I know what you're going to say, and I agree with you, but you're going to have to decide, whether you're willing to do what the rest of the market is going to do or not. And, so that's the first part of it. And then the other part of it is practically like, well, what's a well? And how are we going to know that this thing's safe? Okay, I hear you. This has a well. So before they even bring it up, I bring up all the negatives.
Okay.
Because I know what they are. I've been doing this long enough. I don't even have a list. I just know what they are.
Okay.
And you probably do too, or getting there, Kent. Like,
Yeah.
people are going to have objections. And instead of letting them bring it up, I bring it up, I address it, I say, this is a concern, here's what we're going to do, and we move on. And then they trust me. And sometimes, if there's a property where the objections are so big, and this is a tip I have, I convince them not to buy it.
You're playing the long game. the relationship
convince them
game.
not to buy
Oh,
it. And they're
okay.
like,
If you see enough of objections on their end, you feel like, okay, this is just not the one. You
Yeah.
will genuinely convince
you-
them not to
yeah.
buy it. Not as a bait and switch, but as like, let's
Nope.
just not buy this one and walk away. Okay.
a lot of times I convince people not to buy it in the first place because it's not smart.
Okay. Okay.
They just started. They just started looking.
Okay. Sure.
Why should they buy the first one?
Okay. That makes sense.
I don't know everything about them, and like even someone selling. Like I'm working with someone right now and I'm like, why are you selling? You know, like, well, because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, but you can do this, this, and this and solve that.
Okay.
You know, talking people down actually builds rapport
Yeah.
and trust. And I lose the sale, but I win the referral and I win the
Okay.
trust. And so I know exactly what she's talking about. I do that all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, I guess as I'm thinking, you know, one of the things that I've started to do more because our lead times for our modular horse barns are out until like June, July of next year. So I have started to lead with that multiple times in the last, because for me,
Yeah.
it is what it is. There's not a whole lot I can do to change it. It is what it is. So now this is one of the first things I'm saying in my initial email. Our lead times are X.
Sure.
Does that work for you, essentially? So I guess I'm doing that.
Yeah.
So you're saying you kind of know what the pros and cons are or a property. You're showing me a property. You bring me there. You show me the property, and you actually point out some of the negatives.
All the
okay,
negatives.
cool.
Right away.
Patrick, are you doing that? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in sales and marketing for 20 years plus, and I do tend to and not go for the no, but yeah, kind of like find a reason why it won't work. It's
Right.
fine. You know, it's kind of part of, I think, kind of nurturing an abundance mindset and nurturing a relationship mindset where I want what's best for you, like actually, genuinely. And I don't want to be in a position where I need your money bad enough that I'm willing to forego that. So over the long run, I think that that pays off.
Yeah.
And
Pays dividends.
yeah, absolutely.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, boys. Any final thoughts here?
Good podcast, good episode. Long one, but worth
Yep.
it.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thanks for inviting her on, Kent.
Yeah, it's awesome. Let's do it again.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's wrap it up, boys. This is Metal and Forge. Go to
Sounds good.
mettleandforge.com. That's METTLE, mettleandforge.com. Leave us topic requests on there, guest ideas, feedback. We welcome it.
Right on.
I think that's it. Miller, where can people find you?
goodking.life on Instagram and the website, goodking.life, men's coaching and mentorship community.
And Austin, you're on Facebook?
Yeah, and actually, if you want to read my bio, I have a pretty interesting one. It's on our website, winetrailproperties.com.
Ooh, there we go.
Go to agents, and you'll click on my bio and see pictures of my family and read about my story.
Winetrailproperties.com. And then go to the team and find Austin Lapp. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, maybe you'll get one extra visitor on your website.
Don't crash the site.
Yeah. All right. Bye, boys. Love you guys.
See ya.
Love
Yeah.
you too.